Repeat. Mazda is sadly have to know this.
The Spirit itself beareth witness with our spirit that we are the children of God. And if children, then heirs, heirs of God, and joint heirs with God, glorified together. For I reckon that the sufferings of this present time are not worthy to be compared with the glory which shall be revealed in us. For the earnest expectation of the creature waiteth for the manifestation of the sons of God. For the creature was made subject to vanity, not willingly, but by reason of him who hath subjected the same, in hope, because the creature itself also shall be delivered from the bondage of corruption into the glorious liberty of the children of God. For we know that the whole creation groaneth and travaileth in pain together until now. And not only they, but ourselves also, which have the first fruits of the Spirit, even we ourselves groan within ourselves, waiting for the adoption to it, the redemption of our body. I will declare the decree. The Lord hath said unto me, Thou art my son. This day have I begotten thee. Ask of me, and I shall give thee the heathen for thine inheritance, and the uttermost parts of the earth for thy possession. Thou shalt break them with a rod of iron. Thou shalt dash them in pieces like a potter's vessel. Be wise now, therefore, O ye kings. Be instructed, ye judges of the earth.
Repeat. Mazda is sadly have to know this.
All right, Shalom. First and foremost, I would like to give all praise and glory unto Yahweh Bahashem, Yahweh Shah Bahashem Rakakwadash, and double honors unto the apostles and the elders of GMS who rule well, teach well, made great examples towards younger brothers, and peace and blessings and salutation to the hopeful elect out there pushing his word and truth and in sincerity across the four winds in the name of Yahweh Bahashem, Yahweh Shah Bahashem. Rakakwadash, pushing to get up out of here. Shalom to the hopeful elect, the believers, the listeners whom have came back to the obedience of the scriptures to faith in Yahweh Bashim Al Shai. All right, and what I want to get into with this lesson, dealing with the last scene of Esau's kingdom, because how movies are made. All right, where every movie has a last scene. Okay, and in the movie of Yahweh Bashim Al Shai, we're in the last scene of Esau's kingdom. Okay, in the beginning, of an everlasting scene of Jacob. Okay, and it's beautiful how the Lord, had this thing set up, as we've come, to the end of this man's kingdom, and we're able to fully understand what the Heavenly Father is doing in the earth. Okay, what he's getting ready to do with Esau, these heathens, and what he's about to do with the remnant of his people. Okay, at the return of Yahushua. Okay, we're in the midst of a great transition of power. Okay, matter of fact, let's start with it. Because this is when the scene, all right, let me go here. All right, we're in the midst of a major change of scenery. Okay, because the earth is going to be refreshed after righteousness under the rulership of Israel, okay, under Yahushua. So when you go to matter of fact, let me get that. I got that pulled up. I'll get that in the GNT. Second Ezra 6. All right. So when you go here, it's the book of Second Ezra chapter 6, verse 7. Then I asked, how long a period of time will divide the ages? When will the first age end and the next age begin? Okay, and liken this into scenes. You know how the movies go from one scene to the next scene. Okay, well, we're going from the end, we're going from the scene of Esau to the scene of Jacob. Okay, Isaac is going to begin, his scene is ended. It says he answered, the interval will be no longer than between Abraham and Abraham, showing it's going to be in one lifetime. Okay, we're not going to rule generations after Esau. No, it's going to be, all right, an immediate transition. When Yahushua entered this realm, that's the transition. Okay, because this is what's going to divide the ages of this third world war. Okay, when Yahushua entered this realm, okay, and destroys the militaries of the heathens, okay, and America is set ablaze on fire, turned into the lake of fire. Well, that's the dividing of the ages. It's going to be the beginning of the age of Jacob. Okay, our kingdom starts with the return of Yahushua on no chariots. Okay, all authority will be transferred to Yahushua. Okay, and he's going to distribute that authority amongst his men. You see, it says he answered, the interval will be no longer than that between Abraham and Abraham. He was the grandfather of both Jacob and Esau, and when they were born, Jacob was holding Esau's heel. Okay, Jacob was holding Esau's heel. You see, so you look at, the symbology of, this birth, because it's an actual birth, between, two children, Jacob and Esau. Esau coming out first. Well, they represented his rulership being born in the earth first. Okay, what you call the Renaissance, his rebirth. That was him coming into the blessing. All right, he fully came into the blessing of that was given to him by Isaac. Okay, so that was him fully coming into his blessing. You see, his rulership was birthed in the earth first, and then you will have the rulership of Jacob, and Jacob held his heel. Okay, and the heel represents the end of a man, the feet. Okay, just like in that statue of Daniel, which we'll get into it. Okay, well, this is last scene. Okay, of Esau. Okay, is when he will come back during the Renaissance. You see, there was him being born on the scene for his last performance as ruler. Then he will go into captivity for 1,000 years and be cut off, man. Okay, be completely wrote out the script. He's the only nation that's completely wrote out the script, man. Okay, verse 9 says Esau represents the end of this age, and Jacob represents the beginning of a new age. Okay, so he's in the last scene of his kingdom. His age had a limit on it. Okay, the age of Jacob doesn't have one. You see, the new age is getting ready to come. It doesn't have an end. Esau's kingdom has an end. Okay, and we're in the end. You see, and the things, all right, that need to be happening, everything, that's needed, okay, for this man to be ended is here. Okay, the prophets have awakened. Okay, the elect are being edified and sealed with this understanding. Okay, the nations are at war. Okay, we're in the transition from we're in the transition to a new system, which is going to usher in the MOTB. So everything needed to bring about the end is in play. So we're in the last scene of Esau's kingdom, literally, man. Okay, now let's go get some. Let's get something else and start here, because it was something that was told Daniel. That was pretty heavy. When you go into the concept of the end of Esau's kingdom. Okay, so when you go here to the book of Daniel in chapter 12. in verse 13. All right, now this is what the angel is telling Daniel. Okay, it's Daniel 12 and 13. It said, but go thou way to the end be. Wait a minute. The end. You see? To the end be. So Daniel will come back in the end, in the last scene of Esau's kingdom. For thou shalt rest, I mean Daniel will die, and stand in thy lot at the end of days. Okay? So Daniel was told that he was standing his lot at the end of days, and that's the same for all the prophets. The spirit of the prophets is subject to the prophets. The prophets will come back in their lot as a prophet at the end of days, man, at the end of this man's kingdom, because it's not the end of the world as we know it, of planet Earth existence. No, it's the end of Esau's kingdom, the last days of Esau's kingdom. Okay, so when you go to his word lot, okay, we stand, yeah, we go to the word stand in our lot, okay, which is the word in the Hebrew is amal. Okay, amal, which when you go here it says to arise, okay, because he will come back, you know, through reincarnation. You know, these spirits, all right, are not new. These bodies are new, okay, but these same spirits come back in new body, okay, through the process of reincarnation. That goes for everyone in the earth, you know, our spirits that been here before that come back, okay. So you got the prophets, okay, are back. They've appeared. It says to what? To appear, to arise, to come on the scene, to come on the scene, to stand forth, to appear, to rise up or against. Okay, so the prophet would come on the scene at the end of Esau's kingdom. The Lord would make the prophets appear on the scene through reincarnation. Okay, because that's the main ingredient needed. You know, that's a main event that will have to happen, was the prophets coming back in their lot as prophets and prophesy against this place, man, and prophesy the end of Esau. Okay, so the Lord had to set up where the prophets will come on the scene at the end, okay, and speak the end of this man's kingdom into existence. All right, you go here and you find this same, you know, concept throughout the scriptures about the prophets being raised up, and then the end will come. Okay, you got Isaiah 19 and 19. It says, in that day shall there be an altar to the Lord Yahweh Bashim al-Shai in the midst of the land of Egypt, and a pillar at the border thereof to the Lord. Okay, and these are the camps. You know, these camps are spiritual altars. You know, as we're rehearsing the righteous acts. You know, even the priesthood of Melchizedek. You know, where you have, you know, the priesthood amongst all the tribes. Okay, the priesthood has been extended to all the tribes, and through Yahweh, we're able to make spiritual sacrifices, man. And we go into camp, sacrificing our time, sacrificing our livelihood, our life. Okay, to teach this word, well, that's acceptable to Yahweh Bashim al-Shai. He's accepting it, teaching the doctrine, you know, and teaching this doctrine, you know, correctly is a sweet savor to the Lord. You know, teaching the right doctrine is a sweet savor to Yahweh Bashim al-Shai. You know, but us being a living sacrifice is acceptable to our power through Yahweh, man. Okay, but in order for us to be altars in the midst of Egypt, where we will have to what? Be awakened. We have to come on the scene. Just as Daniel, he came on the scene in the end, in the last days. Okay, so we are in the last days, and the Lord has what? Caused his prophets to come on the scene, and now you have these altars, these camps all over the place, man. Okay, teaching his word. All right, it says, and this shall be a sign, which is a token or proof, and a witness unto the Lord of hosts in the land of Egypt. So the prophets are a witness, all right, that the Lord is dealing with his people, and that the Lord is getting ready to judge. You see, that's a token that the Lord is dealing with his people again, the true Israelites. Okay, the prophets being raised up. For they shall cry unto the Lord because of their oppressors, and he shall send them a Savior and a great one, and he shall deliver them. Okay, so as we will cry out, All right, because we're crying out at camp, we're crying out in prayer, we're crying out even when our spirit is just groaning. Because as we understand the truth, and Yahweh Shai is growing in us, man, we're vexed at this place, man. Which causes our spirit to groan, even though we're, not verbally speaking. So the elect is constantly crying out. And what he said, he's going to send them a savior and a great one that shall deliver them, which that's Yahweh Shai. And Yahweh Shai is the end of Esau's kingdom. Okay? So the last scene of the movie is the prophets coming on the scene. Okay? These camps, these spiritual altars, speaking this man's end to existence, man, crying unto Yahweh by Shema Shai. Okay? So the stage is set for the end of Esau's kingdom, man. We're in the last scene, man. And it's a beautiful thing. Even when you go here. All right, it always begins with the preaching and then the end comes. All right, Isaiah, let's get this Isaiah. Isaiah 61:1, it said, the spirit of the Lord power is upon me, because the Lord have anointed me to preach good tidings unto the meek. He have sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives, and the opening of the prison to them that are bound. And that's through the preaching of his word. And it began with Yahweh Shai. Okay, he set the foundation of the gospel that we preach. As he was preaching to, our people, all right, in that time. And you had those that awakened and believed. They believed in the doctrine. You see, and they're back, to get salvation in this time. But it began with Yahweh Shai, and he quoted this in the book of Luke, the 4th chapter, verse 17 on down. He was going into this because it begins with him, and he laid the foundation. That's why he's the chief cornerstone, a sure foundation, a sure doctrine. And we teach the gospel that Yahweh Shai taught, man. Okay. So when you go into Isaiah 61:1, we carry on this legacy today, but we will have to come on the scene. You see, this time the prophets, all right, in these last days, the prophets will be sent back to teach, all right, the good news, the gospel, also to warn, okay, about the judgment that's coming. You see, so it always starts with the prophets, coming in their light, and then what? To proclaim the acceptable year of the Lord and the day of vengeance of our power, to comfort all that mourn. Wait a minute. Now, the day of vengeance is one thing to preach about, to proclaim liberty to the captives, which is freeing our people's mind from the enchantments of Esau through sound doctrine, man. Open the prisons to them that are bound. Okay. Because we was in the spiritual prison, a mental prison of the enemy, man. Believing in madness, Christianity, black culture, calling ourselves black and niggas and, hoes and, we wanted to be degenerate. We looked at degeneracy as honor and glory. Okay, and we was bound by that way of thinking, but through the preaching of this word, through the spirit and power, Yahweh by Shema Shai, the elect, all right, have been broken out of their prison. Okay, now we await what? Now we have an expectation of what? The day of the Lord, the vengeance of our power, which is what's going to end Esau's kingdom. You see? So it always starts with the prophets coming on the scene teaching, and then it segues to what? The end. Okay? So we're at the end of Esau's kingdom, man. Okay, even when you go here to Matthew, okay, the Most High is setting the stage. He putting all his props. Everything's in place, man. These nations that will form an alliance against this devil. Everybody's in position on the set. I think that's a term they use in movies, position on the set. Okay. Might look that up, might give us some. Let's see. Let's see. Yep. So you go into they got that term position on the set. You know, get back to let me see. You know, and it's the Most High's movie, and everybody is in their position on the set of this last scene. Okay, we go here. It says in filmmaking and production, said Jaro, it said describes a worker's specific title and duties on a movie set, such as a set dresser, a sound mixer, or assistant director. Physical location, it can mean the exact spot where an actor, camera, or piece of equipment must stand or be placed for a specific scene. Okay, so the Lord has the prophets on the scene, and the prophets are where they're supposed to be. That's why every brother got their post in these different camps all throughout America, even throughout the world. You know, brothers came on scene in specific locations, you know, taking their position on the set. Okay, these nations, all right, the way that they're geographically placed, all right, is all for the sake of prophecy. The kings of the East, or those nations in the East, okay, are prepared to go to war. Okay, everyone's in their position. Russia, the chief prince, you know, that big dog status that Russia got over there, he's in his position. They're in their position on the set. You see? And on, but everyone is scoffers, niggas scoffing, they're just in their position on the set. In the last days, that's what comes scoffers and mockers. That's a part of it too. The last days, they have their position on the set for this last scene. Okay, so you go let's go back. Let's go here as Matthew 24:14. And it says, and this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world for a witness unto all nations, and then shall the end come. And that's happening, man. That's happening. Okay, the gospel is going throughout the world, which is going to usher what? The end. Then shall the end come. The true gospel, not Christianity, not Islam, not Roman Catholicism. No, the true gospel, man, that will be preached by the true prophets of Yahweh Bashim al-Shah in the name of Yahweh Bashim al-Shah. So as this doctrine is being preached, now we're seeing the end manifest. Now things are happening. Now as we speak these things, they're happening in real time. Okay, prophecy is becoming reality. Okay, you see, and Esau, he's moving like a man that's on his way out. Okay, so let's go from there. You know, and it's all about timing. You know, and us waking up is a major indicator that we're in the end. That's why you go to Revelation 11 and 11. Get to the point. This Revelation 11:11. It says, and after 3 days and a half, the spirit of life from the Most High entered into them, and they stood upon their feet, and great fell upon. It said, and great fear fell upon them which saw them. Okay, so those 3 days and a half represents 350 years from 1619 to 1969. Okay, when you had our people in the dead estate, spiritually dead estate. You see, but in 1969, the Lord began to let the Spirit move, beginning with Elder Abba Bivens, which was John the Baptist and Elijah coming back to fulfill Malachi 4:6. Okay, because even matter of fact, we gotta get that. We gotta get that because it deals with the end. Okay, so you go to Revelation 11:11. The 350-year period of us being spiritually dead, then through Elder Abba Bivens, which was Elijah and John the Baptist coming back. Okay, that's when the prophets started coming back on the scene. Because it took the spirit of life being put in us, because we didn't come in knowing we was prophets. We wasn't born. They announced that we was prophets at the hospital. Oh, Obadiah coming back. That's Ezekiel. No. This word went forth, and it began to awaken our spirits up to who we really are. You know, it's like we were spiritual sleeper cells in America until the time appointed. We heard this word and we was activated. Then we began to be alive in our lot, man, as prophets. You know, Lord we are those men coming back and we endure. This is on Malachi 4:6. It says, and he shall turn, matter of fact, 4 and 5. It says, behold, I will send you Elijah the prophet before the coming of the great and dreadful day of the Lord. And that great and dreadful day is the end of Esau's kingdom. It's going to be dreadful for you Edomites, man. This is the end of your rulership. This great and dreadful day of the Lord Yahweh Bashim al-Shai. And he shall turn the heart of the fathers to the children and the heart of the children to their fathers, lest I come and smite the earth with a curse, man. Okay? So these are the times we're in before that great and dreadful day, Elijah will come back. He's came back. And he's activated the ministry of the prophets through the spirit and power Yahweh Bashim al-Shai. He was a tool used to activate the ministry of the prophets, man, which fulfilled Daniel, all right, that what we will come on the scene at the end of days, man, and not a lot. Okay, at the end of Esau's days. Okay, so let's go here. And the elect will be turned back, you know, to the fathers, you know, the church fathers. You know, say going back to Elder Albert Bivens, you know, King Masha, High Priest Ariah. Okay, you know, turn back to their teachings, you know, and they was invested into us, man. You see, they invested into the church, and it caused us to turn back, you know, to the teachings of Yahweh Bashim al-Shai in these last days. Okay, so when you go back to Revelation 11. It's Revelation 11:11, and it says, after 3 days and a half, the spirit of life, you know, spirit of Yahushua from the Most High entered into them, and they stood up upon their feet, and great fear fell upon them which saw them, which is the elite, because the elites know that this is their end. Us awakening is their end. They know this, man, and this is why they have to double down and go all out and try to establish this technocracy, man. That's why they even have to do particular things before they're ready. Okay, it says, and they heard a great voice from heaven saying unto them, come up hither. And they ascended up to heaven in a cloud, and their enemies beheld them. Okay, and what is this? Is the end of Esau's kingdom, because this cloud is a chariot, and the elect are going to get beamed up in those chariots, while Yahushua is destroying Esau's kingdom and the militaries of the heathen. So this is the end. This is the last scene. We wake up, okay? Prophets will start to be born into the earth, awakening to their purpose, teaching camps, these altars, okay? And then the end will come, the end of this man's kingdom. So you see that how us waking up set the stage, all right, for the end of Esau's kingdom. You know, the Lord sent his prophets back right at the end, man. Okay? To get this nigga out of here, man. You see? And that's why, let's go here. To the book of Daniel. We go to the book of Daniel. Chapter 2. Okay, it's Daniel 2 and 44. All right, and it says, and in the days of these kings, okay, and this is speaking of what? The kings of Esau, because it's speaking about the 10 toes, who represent NATO, America, and EU. So in the days of this beast system, when Esau will have his rulership, okay, when he will be, have his last empire established in the earth, okay. It says in the days of these kings shall the power of heaven set up a kingdom. Okay, and that kingdom that's being set up is the everlasting kingdom of Israel. Okay, that's why Yahushua said, well, the kingdom is within you. So before the physical infrastructure is built for our kingdom, before we're delivered or we get those new bodies, the kingdom is already built up, the elect being edified. The edification goes to build up. Okay, because we're being built up for the kingdom. Okay, that's why this is not a light thing, man. We're being built up for an everlasting righteous kingdom, man. We're being built up for it now. Lord is setting it up now. Okay, in the last days of Esau's kingdom, which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left to other people. You see that? But it shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. Okay, so our kingdom doesn't have an end. It should never be destroyed, never be left to other people, to never be transferred to other people. Okay, but it's going to break in pieces and consume all the kingdoms of the world. Okay, all these heathens will be stripped of all power forever, man. All authority. Okay, and this is the last scene, and our kingdom is going to stand forever, man. So we're in some beautiful times. All right, and we're seeing this play out exactly how the Lord said it will play out, man. So we in the last scene. Everybody's in positions on the set. Everybody's in their position on the set, man. So that's the point. I'll leave it there, Lord will. You brothers and you few souls edify once again. I want to give all praise and glory unto Yahweh Bahashim, Yahushua Bahashim, Rakakwadash, and double honors unto the apostles and the elder GMS who rule well, teach well, being great examples towards younger brothers. And peace and blessings, salutations to the